Hi, folks. As mentioned, I just want to do a quick walkthrough on showing you how to set your Mac up, especially if you're new to a Mac environment, and also just to kick yourself off with proper file management. So on default, when you purchase, especially if it's a brand new computer, you will not have anything on your desktop in regards to your hard drive, and you won't be able to see anything down the side as to where you can save your files. So you might feel yourself a little bit lost, and everything might already be getting dumped to the desktop. Highly recommend we don't do that. Best to save things within your hard drive and not to muck up your desktop. So in case you're unsure as to how to do this, what we want to do is from Finder, this is Finder here, if you haven't discovered that quite yet. From Finder, what we're going to do is we're going to go Finder and we're going to click Preferences. So on default, you will not have this external disks checked off. So first and foremost, you want to click that. The second thing that you're going to do is set up your sidebar. So you're going to click Sidebar. I have several things down here. I do suggest, as you folks are getting used to using your Macs and to keep things organized at this time, all you want to do is check off this one where it has a little house. So we're going to click that on, and this will probably have the name that you set your computer up with. So go ahead and turn that on. You can see if I turn this off and then back on again, you can see it shows up at the bottom there. So now we've got that there. So from here, we're going to have a few of our other files in there. Try not to touch those at all. But what we want to do is we now want to create our own folder. So we're going to right click here, or we'll press Control and click, and we're going to say New Folder. From here, we can now call this Mohawk. It might be best to call this Mohawk 2022. Maybe it's going to be, first we're going to call this Mohawk, and then perhaps within our Mohawk folder, we can say number 1, and we're going to call this Fall 2022. So because that folder's down at the bottom, it might be nice to kick that way up at the top. What you can do is if you just do a quick one click, it will highlight that folder, so you could change the name. We can put, for instance, an exclamation point. We can put an underscore. We could put one of those things, maybe a space, to get that to go way up at the top so you're not searching for it at any time. You can also then at that time take this and we can slide that over, and now we have a quick reference into that folder. Okay. So now we've got that all set up. So we have our Mohawk folder. Perhaps you might be doing other things on your computer. So you're going to keep your Mohawk folder strictly based for your school items. So now we have one, this is our very first semester. We're going to call this Fall 2022. And let's create another folder. So you can create your folders in any way you would like. I personally like to number my folders because I like to be able to arrange the order that I like them in. But some of you might prefer to leave them in alphabetical order. This way you might find that easier to find. So personally for me, I said I like to number. Perhaps numbering might come in handy if you're thinking, which class do I have Monday first and then second on Monday? So you can name those 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. But again, it's up to you on how you feel is best. So you have number 1 typography, and then within our typography folder, again, we could do this a few ways. You can go 1, and we can call this week 1. We can also just call this week 1 because our numbering will keep this in order anyways. And you could potentially file your work just based on projects. So let's just start with that first larger assignment, which will be our journal. So again, because our journal, once we get a few other projects down the line in here, I like to think of this project, that's our first one. So again, I would then personally add that number. Once we get into our journal, our journaling project, the first task is to collect our images. So let's go number 1, images. Click away, and again, I'm going to right click, new folder, and I'm going to call this number 2. This would be, say, now where I'm going to set all those images up. So where am I going to bring all those images in? So I set them up in a nice layout for handing in. So that's now what we're going to call, for instance, a working file. A working file can be anything from an InDesign file to a Photoshop file to an Illustrator file. So you could potentially go ahead and create all of the folders for those within this folder. So now, depending on what platform we're in and what file we're working in, we will save those in the proper folder. Again, we're just eliminating any need to go digging for files. Eventually, you folks are going to end up with projects that are going to have files on top of files on top of files, various versions. So keeping yourself organized from the beginning is best. Then what we're going to do from there, we'll probably perhaps maybe hand in a PDF. So we can call this a PDF. Perhaps maybe it's a JPEG. You can call that JPEG. You can save those files in there. And then perhaps maybe our last stop is final. I like to capitalize this, final, hand in. So whatever file you're going to be in placing into the Dropbox will go here. Again, you're not going to mix up your final files anywhere, and you're not going to accidentally submit an old file. You know that that final hand in is here. And same thing when we refer back and we need to reference a final file, we know that this is where it is. So just as one final little tip, when it comes to the naming convention of our files, it's best practice to get into to always name our files by perhaps project name. So say journal, a dash, an underscore, your name. Maybe it's first initial, last name, maybe it's your full name, just to make things very clear for your teachers down the line. There will potentially be instances that your other profs will give you an actual naming convention. So always be sure to read your briefs to confirm whether that has been verified or not, or whether they have specified that, I should say, or not. And if they did not, again, best practice to just get into the groove of naming, especially your final files, with the project name, dash, and your name. When it comes down to your files, probably your working files, again, like I mentioned, you'll end up with several versions. So again, when you start a project off, maybe again, good practice to start while we're at the beginning of our college experience. We will call this journal dash V1 for version 1. And perhaps maybe we have a discussion, you need to make an edit. You can save that other draft and we'll call this new one V2. And then once we get to our final, we call that our project name, final, our name, etc. So just a few little tips to get yourself started. Feel free to ask any questions in regards to filing, or if you want me to review anything down the line.